And this is really what drives us here at this podcast, is having people this excited about things that are happening right in their backyard.
Hi, welcome to Everyday Climate Champions, where we speak with inspiring community members here in the San Francisco Bay Area about how they're putting real climate solutions into action. This episode is a bit different from the usual format of Everyday Climate Champions. We wanted to take a step back and talk about what we're learning in our conversations with community members here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we thought you might want to know a little more about us. So we're going to have a conversation among three of us co-hosts to share our perspectives. I'm Dalya Massachi, and I'm located in San Leandro, California, also known as Muwekma Ohlone Indigenous Territory. My role at Everyday Climate Champions is executive producer and editor.
My name is Ellisa Feinstein. I am based in the beautiful city of San Francisco, and I am a host and producer of Everyday Climate Champions.
My name is Sean Mendelson, and so we can triangulate the Bay. I live in Campbell, which is right next to San Jose in the South Bay. And my role is producer and interviewer as well.
There are also a few other people on our team. We have a dynamic duo of teen co-hosts that work together. They are Hasini Parapalli and Isabella Genero.
We're always welcoming new folks, so I think you'll hear some new host voices soon.
In addition to our hosts and producers of Everyday Climate Champions, we are very fortunate to have Martin Sanchez, an audio producer and engineer from Seismic Sound, who volunteers his time to make sure that all of our episodes sound excellent.
We're finding out that you don't actually need to be a quote-unquote recognized expert to take effective climate action here in our own communities, at home, at work, at school, in your neighborhood, your place of worship, and even in the public policy arena.
We investigate and highlight insightful climate solutions in our communities with an emphasis on climate justice.
We always make sure to leave you, our listeners, with a way to get involved in climate action. Take ideas and insights from our guests and make them your own. Build on them and find ways to make them work in your own context.
For example, the couple things I heard in recent episodes, there was one where Ellisa interviewed somebody about going vegan and the impact of meat on climate change. And so I recently had an Impossible Burger. I've had Impossible Burgers before, but I made a concerted effort to cut back my red meat in my diet. And then in another episode where Dalya spoke to a Native American woman, she spoke about Native Lands app, and I've used that to also successfully reach out to the tribal folks from the community where I live.
I've been in the climate change / sustainability world for a long time. And most of the time you hear from very high level experts. And it's so great to see people making a big impact, either from Black churches or what they're doing on the youth side. And it's really inspiring. And it seems like anyone can really get involved to make an impact in your community.
Yeah, I'm really a fan of the fact that we dip into a diverse community. And it's fun and exciting to hear how people from different walks of life are contributing, because we're all in this together. When we have an equitable approach to climate change, meaning that we make sure to put spotlights on voices of people who might not otherwise be heard, then we're benefiting everybody at the same time.
I found that our podcast is a good starting point for our listeners to find their way into thinking deeply about the climate crisis and finding ways that make sense to get active around the climate. We've begun to hear from listeners that they're finding the podcast inspiring and educational, and that it gives them ideas about what they can do in their own communities around these issues. You know, the climate solutions that our guests are working on often fly under the radar. So their important insights and ideas can't inspire other people. So that's why we shine a light on them.
Sometimes people underestimate what impact that they can have. Like if I take this kind of action, what's the impact really going to be in the scheme of things? And when you learn from different people about what they're doing, and it's not these huge, they're not going to the climate conferences, they're not making policy, but they're still making a big difference. Small action makes it into this bigger collective. And I think you really learn that from our guests.
Now, Dalya, why did you choose to get involved with Everyday Climate Champions?
Well, I've always loved nature, and I was involved in environmental work at different times in the past. But this is our last decade to make a big difference for the climate, according to the United Nations. They call this the decisive decade. And I found that this work is actually really related to a lot of other social justice issues I care about. Plus, I love journalism and learning about new people, so it seemed like a natural fit for me. How about you, Sean?
Yeah, when I first read that you were looking for a team to put together, I thought to myself, this seems fun and creative, and I needed to find a place to plug in. And I feel like when you're speaking to people who have solutions that people can do and are relatable, like we're talking about, you're actually moving that needle. And then this whole movement, coupled with equitable transition, including everybody in the process, was a big part of it for me. And your vision, Dalya, of giving a voice to everyday people was quite appealing. What about you, Ellisa?
Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of podcasts. So when I learned about this, I was really excited because not only are podcasts a big passion of mine, because I love learning from other people, I'm also an environmentalist and super passionate about the issues surrounding climate change and sustainability. I realized that there really wasn't a platform to learn about what everyday people like you and me are doing in this area. And so this really was a great platform to learn more about my neighbors who are doing work in the areas that I'm really passionate about.
That's a great point. Yeah, there aren't a lot of podcasts like ours that focus on what we call everyday people. It's a really good supplement, I would say, to the information that's out there from climate scientists, academics, other professionals in this field. We don't also get this other piece about our neighbors who are actually part of this as well and bring an on-the-ground perspective. So that's part of what's so important about Everyday Climate Champions. We're kind of like the homegrown supplement to the mainstream climate news. Okay, so what about the specific episodes you've worked on or listened to? I'd love to know what really stuck out for you, Ellisa and Sean.
For me, I kind of reaffirmed the things that I was interested in. It's so corny, but I see the children as our future, or whatever that Whitney Houston line is, I think. So I've actually interviewed a teenager. I've talked to an elementary school kid. I've talked to a therapist. And so for me, talking to these people, it's just a unifying thing, which is that we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same community. You know, one thing I wanted to mention that we edited out of the episode where I talked to a therapist who specifically deals with eco-anxiety is she was talking about this moment when she was in a Costco and she was just debating between two bins. And she was like, well, this bin comes from a further distance, but this bin over here uses better sustainable stuff. And so she called it rock bottom. And I had this experience too. We're all trying to manage the anxiety that comes from all of this. So I realized self-compassion and if you're contributing a little bit here and there, then that will maybe influence the next person, your family, your friends, your coworkers to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you said about trying to choose between two different products, like what's more sustainable. It's one of the reasons I was really excited about interviewing the person who opened up a zero waste store literally 100 feet from my house. I'm like, oh, she's done all this research, so you don't even have to think about it. So now I know. So I took some of that eco anxiety out of my day-to-day shopping for certain things. There's other topics that were really important to me. So one of those topics was plant-based diets because I'm vegan and really wanted to better understand how that played a part into mitigating climate change. And one of the things I learned was that something that I love, which not everybody loves, and I understand that, is tofu, and how that footprint is 40.4 times less land and 9.5 less water than beef burgers. And that's a really substantial amount of resources when you think about how much beef is part of our daily diets. And what I really liked about the guest I have wasn't like, oh, everyone has to go vegan, everyone has to go plant-based, but more like just how do you reduce? Because even reducing makes an impact.
And he presented the facts so clearly in a way that was, no pun intended, easily digestible. What about you, Dalya?
Well, I have kind of a bird's eye view of all of them taken together. And I really like finding out what climate action looks like in different contexts. For example, Sean, you did an episode with a musician, and I did one with some artists, and they're bringing climate themes into their work. We've also heard from some parents talking to their kids about what's going on with the climate and what to prepare for. I love that we're hearing about ways to change the way we think and act, about how we produce and use energy. And we've been talking to people of all ages. Our youngest guest was actually a fourth grader, and we have also spoken with retired people who are finding ways to become active in their own lives.
Out of curiosity, Dalya, what are you looking forward to covering in the months to come?
I'm really looking forward to speaking with people from different workplaces on how they are taking climate action at work, an area that is really starting to take off. I also want to dig deeper in communities that are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, because I believe we can best address the climate crisis by also addressing issues of racial justice and socioeconomic inequality.
Yeah, I'm also interested in climate justice. And also for me, I'm interested in new innovations because we have to figure out innovative ways to help adapt to climate events while also reducing the effect of climate change. Ellisa, what about you?
I am looking forward to topics that are generally not the forefront of climate change, like alternative non-motorized transportation and mushrooms or mycelium, which sequester carbon, plus big agriculture. Just topics that might not seem as sexy, but are as important in terms of mitigating climate change.
Let's wrap up here by sharing a bit about what our listeners have been telling us. After listening to our episode on a farm-to-school cafeteria program in Watsonville, California, one listener said that the farm-to-cafeteria movement she heard about on the podcast is attractive to her children's school. So it gave her an idea. We also heard from listeners about the episode on people-powered solar as a climate justice solution. One told us, I am a Bay Area resident and I had no idea about that project. I liked learning about it, something tangible that I could grasp onto. I want to go check it out and see what they're doing.
And this is really what drives us here at this podcast, is having people this excited about things that are happening right in their backyard.
Another listener, in response to the one about the hands-on climate education and restoration in elementary schools, said, "It made the worrying a little lighter knowing that there are programs and teachers out there caring and putting their concerns into action. It gave me ideas and hope."
We also heard from a parent about the episode in Adapting to Droughts During the Climate Crisis. My 7-year-old and I love the podcast. I enjoyed the one about the man who got rid of his lawn and planted drought-resistant plants. That was wild.
This podcast is always a work in progress, and we want to hear your suggestions. You'll find our listener feedback survey right below every episode's description. If you, dear listener, have any interest in working with us on the podcast, drop us a line. Thanks, Ellisa and Sean. Bye for now. You've been listening to Everyday Climate Champions, presented by the Climate Reality Project's Bay Area chapter. If you know any local folks who would make great guests, please drop us an email. As Climate Reality founder and former U.S. Vice President Al Gore says, solving the climate crisis is within our grasp, but we need people like you to stand up and act. To learn more, please visit climaterealitybayarea.org. See you next time.